and I'm having long money like Ross Perot. Man, a large black bank, United, what is it? United Bank One? Ooh, did I get it wrong? One United Bank. Oops, let me edit that right there. I wasn't even looking, I'm just responding. One, I know it'll update later, so there you go. Save those changes. No PowerPoint presentation for this one. Can you believe it? Also, no screen shares for you on this one, just the conversation in general about it, because it is something that was recently released and it does have a deeper ramification for me. Now, I was looking at this thing here, and if you don't know yet, it is the release of that. Now, yeah, let me at least show the picture, right? It is the release of the Harriet Tubman Wakanda sign on the One United Bank card. Couple of responses out there and then a couple of images on it. I just want to give a little bit of color from my perspective on it and from a level of influence. So this one is a good story, but hold on, player. Hold on, player. Run that back for him right there. Investments, bonds, and stocks. These niggas be trying to make movies when they get in front of these bitch ass groups. What? System, black men. Save yourself, black men. They think you'll save your soul, black men. Pain in me addiction. Falling out of control. Falling out of control. All right, so now you're good to go. Just got to get a little bit of music inspiration before I get into the topic, because sometimes when you talk economics and things like that, it can fly right over. So I thought I would lay it out with a little bit of our pop music artistry. That is E40, Balling Out of Control. It was something that helped raise me up as music. So I figured I'd start my show just with that. And if they copyright strike it, I would only ask that they at least notify the owner. So moving forward on the topic of this large black bank, first of all, the idea of it being a black bank has to be looked into. And what do you mean by it being a black bank? So the CEO of United One Bank, then being Kevin Cohey. Let me go on and share, because I said I wasn't going to do it, but I can, just to make sure that the images are on the screen and they have that content, the sources. And so that's what we're referring to here. But Which one do I need? I actually need some context here. So let me give a couple of context clues and then we'll get into it. This guy, Kevin Cohey, let's bring that one over there so you can see it. And just the idea of him being a CEO of a bank, we already know that that's something that could be celebrated. Black bank, you can do the history lesson behind it and why it's designated as a black bank. But most importantly, what the hell would make that team put this on their card? I mean, it's an option. If you look at it, they already have products that are out there. For me, I think it is a lot of symbolism, and the symbolism in it. When I look at the Harriet Tubman and why all of this, contextualize it in the modern day conversations around reparations and HR 40 and all of that, that is the political part. And this is the economic part. This is a demonstration of having a funding mechanism that can roll out day one. So when you're asking the American federal government to back your black institutions, and you're doing so all the way up to the executive office, and that executive office is releasing or publishing a budget proposal for 2020. In that budget proposal, you're going to want, let me make sure you can see me when I say this, because some people think this shit's a game. I think the camera is right about there. You want that to be 100% ironed out. What is your funding mechanism? How will you distribute it? And I think the symbolism underneath this, by having a black bank and a black CEO and his team develop a product or a financial instrument and put her on the cover. And that symbolism is not just Black History Month, nor is it just the symbol of love, but it is a demonstration of we are ready. And anyone who could argue against we are ready to roll it out or to even have the conversation, it would go right over my head and it would miss me. We're not talking on the same level of global political, economic politics and such. You're not talking pro-black or black rationalism or black logic if you don't see that this demonstration was one that was in your favor and in your interest. Probably don't even bank with those folks. Probably still someone who banks on the other side, or just, I prefer cash as king for the predominant share of your transactions. But even those are through those banking institutions, the Wells Fargo's, the Chase, like, who is it? Somebody was actually having this conversation. There he is right there. Tone Talk. Somebody was willing to have the conversation. And I was also on, this is a YouTube content creator that also delves in this type of conversation and influence at higher levels, and those higher levels then having these conversations behind those echoed halls and in those chambers. And sometimes you need a black CEO to make a stand. You need them to do some shit that just triggers it. And the reason why I worded this topic the way I did, the largest one finally gets its media attention, is because outside of this, when is the last time you even heard about the Black Bank and what its financial situation was, or any of their products? When were they promoted to you? You'll hear black people saying we need the bank black. However, they're not the most competitive in the marketing space or in the wallet share. Not many of our home loans are originated by them or even backed in any economic endeavor. Where are we? How many of our small businesses are actually funded or have an account with this bank? See, those are the questions that would progress the conversation, rather than getting lost on just a symbolic message and then not even rooting that symbolic message in reparations. It jumps the gun to say we have this card and we put her on there. But I think that it is an important step or an important element of the reparations debate. So you can leave your chats in the chat, agree or disagree, your comments. Definitely would love to appreciate to have more conversations around topics like this. But largest black owned bank, United One or One United, I think it is One United. I don't bank with them, of course. I don't have any of their products, not a single one. And that is for other reasons. I could look into the CEO himself and see if this is the first time that he started having conversations or starting even trying to be a part of that global dialogue. I'm pretty sure that it is not. As you see, they had him on the Breakfast Club as well a couple of years back. So he is somebody who has said some things and put himself out there to have these conversations. it's up to us to make sure that these conversations are beneficial, that they're timely, that they're not dropping the ball, but that they are doing their part as Black CEOs and as a part of our group and our ability to execute. And I say that from a number of lenses, right? So I think reparations is more than just a symbolic win. I am a Black man. I have a Black household, so I see the personal victory as well as the global. So it's not just the domestic and what could you do at 40 acres that I continue to have the conversation for, but also because I understand the power dynamics that are at play with a statement that says reparations for Blacks. Anyway, government bailouts and things like that. It is a bank. It is something. When we start looking into the information and we're looking for, the big Black businesses, if you don't want to shop at Gucci, let's say you're up there and you were looking for a Rolls Royce or something, and you needed to find a Rolls Royce that was available on the market because you made your moves, and now it's time to get you that Rolls Royce or something like that. You would have a hard time finding a Black Rolls Royce dealership owner. You would have a hard time finding one. And I can show you that there is one, but that it would take that work in order to actually find them. And because of that, then it's definitely hard to compete in a conversation with people who don't think that we deserve. Like, here's something my son said. I was like, man, I like this car, but I like this one and I like this one. And my son had to have been about 6 or 7 years old. And he was like, why buy one when you can own the dealership? Now, that was a 6, 7-year-old's rationale and logic. 6 or 7 years old, the dealership. And so to be that one who can finally get up there and say, well, I want that Rolls Royce, and then to have to do that work to be able to find the Black man that you can actually get it from, is that logical next step to say, well, how then do you become the Rolls Royce dealer? And so Porsche, Jaguar, and some of the other ones, that's what this story is about from the Boston Herald when they ran some information about Cohee. These are some of the things that other folks would say against that Black business, that Black CEO of the Black bank. All right, so inside the house paid for by the bank, police say Cohee kept cocaine, illegal narcotics, and opiates. Police say Cohee agreed to participate in a drug diversion program in exchange for the drug charges being dismissed. And at one point, while the house was being filmed for an unknown MTV series, Cohee met a woman who would later accuse him of sodomy. The pair had met while the woman was working as a stylist on the set of his house while MTV took photos for the show. The sodomy charges were later dropped. All of this happened on the road to Cohee asking the government to bail out the bank, One United, for $50 million. So those are the stories that can be published about the guy who's behind the guy who's trying to create that space of Black dealers in that upper echelon space. Just so happens to be the same type of attacks that you would have against reparations. It's that same thing, the judicial, when you have that man who was in the judiciary and his calling was to go against, the federal, the Justice Oversight Committee, and the heartbreak that happened there in Baltimore that finally got those Negroes off their ass again and back on that soapbox. Both of those people in high spaces, politics, they just passed, but not until after this type of slander was used against them or these type of allegations were brought up on the mainstream media on the other side of the fence. And so B1 Brother Moses would say it is one heck of a feat and an accomplishment for him to be the CEO, that there is a lot of things that you can say. And what in the hell is this? If not symbolism, what is it that you think this actually is? When they designed that card and was like, this is the card that we should have. Ooh, when they had all their marketing design sitting on the table and they was looking at the motherfuckers and they was like, ooh, that one right there. And there was somebody in that room who saw what they were delivering on. Let me see. I know they're trying to pop up commercials because we're resharing the information that they shared. So, but in any event, Is it the Wakanda sign? That's where they're going to take the conversation, and which is a deflection from reparations that I continuously give. Stay focused. Do not be distracted. Cartoon images are something that me and Brother George Macon have broken down over time. This ain't new. That they would put the cartoon image on the card and make that symbolism work for the, those folks who just have to understand it in whatever way that they can. This is what they used to have the argument against reparations that said food stamps was your reparations. And so I remember the food stamp booklet. Let's just take that conversation. I remember the food stamp booklet, and it came down in 1s and 5s, and they had the different denominations, and they had different images that they put on them. It wasn't Harriet Tubman, for one. It wasn't a black person at all. And then welfare and food stamps ended up being something that benefited white women even more than the black woman. So for two, that was not our reparations, just to have that conversation. But let's take it a step further, because it was the ability to create a denomination, a currency that was accepted in stores near you. And the symbolism behind putting out a card is the symbolism of a funding mechanism for reparations. So while the cartoon image that they put on the card is what gets the attention of the media, and finally people can say, oh yeah, there is that one black bank that has over $650 million in a billion with a B, a big old Bentley B. See, Brother Moses is only asking for 200 billion more just to round up his budget from 4.8 trillion to 5 trillion in the first place. And they got 250 billion. And he's already somebody who was asking for bank bailouts. It seems to make sense. But if you don't play the game at the high level, you'll miss it, and you might get caught up on whether or not he did it or not. Oh, he's such a bad guy. If he did it, he's a piece of shit. Let's not be distracted that is the tactic that is always used. The sex life or sexual selection, Darwinism. That's all that they had on that seemed to be worth it. If you take the meat and throw away the bone, then I think you have a hell of a conversation. Symbolism in itself. So putting Harriet Tubman, the woman, on the card, that is a conversation that they can have if they want to operate in the gender space. I don't give a fuck. I am not the one who cares about what they do. My ETF already got a bank account set up. The bank error, or whatever you want to call it, that is not the issue there. The issue is the conversation on reparations. Do not get lost. But the good brother here already, this is Tone Talks. If you don't know who he is, you can subscribe and check out some of their content. They have conversations about it as well. If you want more context, that video is there for you. The title being Harriet Tubman, Wakanda sign on one United Bank card shows what we get wrong on wealth. I don't disagree with his perspective as how he breaks it down. Some of the things that he was saying about the symbolism, let me see, I think I had time-stamped it in my notes here.
Are your business practices about what Harriet Tubman was talking about?
Things like that.
See, they did this film and they put Cynthia Erivo on there. She was on there looking lost and scared.
I don't go into the whole Cynthia Erivo. That's not my concern. I am somebody who has work and influence to do and to exercise here in America. And so me having the conversation from a Cynthia Erivo would only be to entertain somebody who knows the name of actresses.
They did this Harriet film. I talked about it. They had a black man chasing Harriet Tubman when no black man chased Harriet Tubman.
The theme of the story is not something that would have been relevant to me or the new movie that was published. It's not that symbolism that I'm talking about here.
This is what we're dealing with. There was never a black man that chased Harriet Tubman, but they had Bigger Long chasing Harriet Tubman.
So he's talking about propaganda or the writing or changing of history, including other parts into the story that need not be stated.
And then they had Cynthia Erivo play Harriet Tubman, but never dealt with your Igbo, or you Olu, or Dahlia.
That was the part that got me.
Again, the article comes out in the New Yorker. Read it on.
And he also shares a link there. But are you Igbo or Dahlia? And so for me, I'm taking that conversation to the next level from right there. And it goes to the next argument, or number 3, when they say, well, what about those Africans who sold Africans? And then what about those Africans in America who owned slaves as well? That's where the conversation would pick up for me. And then the ability of tying that to Harriet Tubman and that symbolism, not the movie, but the actual information is where Brother Moses is. And I deal a lot with 1862, as those who have watched this, they already know. And then the moving forward into our freedom. But the fight against Jim Crow, the agricultural South, we were up, what was it, like 85 to 96% of us were still in the agrarian South. We were still building on the legacy. This is Black History Month. Let me teach. We were still building on the legacy of the Henry Blair, who holds the second African-American patent, or U.S. patent. He was issued it, but what it was agriculture, early 1800s, around 1830s or something like that. It's like 32 years before the era that I'm talking about. Blair patented the corn and the cotton planter, so to be able to plant it, the wheels on the side, the long shaft, all of that long black shaft, pause right there. His patents greatly increased farm efficiency, reducing the time and labor of planting those crops. So when you had acres upon acres, row after row, line after line that had to be planted, and you needed them distributed based on time, boom and boom, boom and boom, boom. And you was a musician type of nigga when you spit your bars. We needed the Henry Blair's patent, his invention, because now we're cultivating crops in these long lines that we will come and pick up a little bit later. That labor is what was not compensated. That labor is the reparations claim. That invention then being the thing that propelled not just American agriculture forward, but even today, I'll give you the fun fact that it was over 256. Let me give you that number. It was 264 billion in total two-way U.S. trade just on agricultural goods. That was 2017. According to whom? According to the Office of the United States Trade Representative. Black inventors in agriculture are important. It's Black History Month, so we can continue to highlight those Black inventors, like I just gave you one, I'll give you another one. The transportation refrigeration system was invented by Frederick McKinley Jones and is one of the most important inventions in modern agriculture, patented in 1940. So you're talking about the 1820s, 1830s, the second patent for an African-American, now the Black inventor in the 1940s, because up until the 1920s and 30s, we were 85 to 95% still in the agrarian South, right? And then the migrations happened in World War II, but patented in 1940, Fred Jones' invention was installed on trucks, boats, planes, and rail cars to improve worldwide food distribution in domestic and global trade. Other concepts such as frozen foods, supermarkets, and container shipping were all derived from the work of Frederick Jones. Without a Jones, there is no Walmart. It just does not exist. The Walton family then that came up around that same era and was able to benefit from that same everything that we contribute, that same invention or patent, that same technology, that same brilliance. That is us. Not just the invention. Remember, we were the workers of that, and we used that same invention in order, and not every farm had the cotton gin. And even that was after you had already had to plant the seeds. But we had to plant the seeds. But anyway, planting the seeds, that's going to be our job. And this agrarian South still has its lion's share of challenges. You know, there's still the crime, there's still high poverty, the education system, there's still water, there's still basic. But what I do like about it is when you look down and start looking at these, what they have declared to be national forests, that is good land. And the same way that in 1862, they issued this right to confiscate land, that can still happen even today. Even today. good trees, good waterways underneath it, good resources, good viable land. And there is one idea that says Black folks need to work their way, pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And there's the other line of thought that said, look, this was ours anyway. And the only difference is there were folks who actually received more than 40 acres, and there were folks who were denied that 40 acres. And it is up for us to determine what you would do with your own individual 40 acres, but it's not up to us to argue against it. If there was one unified position that I think every Black person, and then in the diaspora, and then just for the sake of symbolism, we can take this same concept that helps feed the world. I'm gonna hit you with some more facts. Because they like facts, they don't like when I rant. Historical figures such as Booker T. Washington, who worked to offer agricultural education to Blacks under the Second Morrill Act of 1890. So what happens? You have these figures. You have this Henry Blair in the early 1800s who has this patent that allows you to reduce the time and labor on planting these crops. And you have the distribution of land for planting and making these crops, and agriculture then being taxed. It was 80% of the tax revenue of the 1800s. 1860 is the note that they'll give you. That is us. And they want to continue to argue against reparations or to deflect from it or to make these little cartoon caricatures the main point of the conversation and not the information that Brother Moses would give you. So in the 1860s, they started this Homestead Act that was giving away a hell of a lot of land. And we were the ones who were denied that land, but at the same time, given that 40 acres in the Mule Promise. It is the premise of reparations. Some of that land and another bill in that same administration, the Lincoln administration, the Republican administration, as you want to call it, or Democrat, whoever you want to conflate it to be, but that same exercise of economic and political power in the 1860s was confiscating land, distributing land, and then denying the rights to that land to others while promising it, but still based on the back of an economy of Black men and women and our children and our elders, but us. 80% of the tax revenue of the South and up until the 1920s. So I got to get you there. But I got to tell you that there was also a bill that was created for the creation of those HBCUs, to which we can say we benefit from, many of which are A&M, agriculture and mechanics. So they have something in the basis of that farming. Booker T. Washington is one who created one. Tuskegee, as we know it. And or a pioneer of so much all the way into the 1920s. You can look at the healthcare disparities based on that same syphilis study. Tuskegee, that same one. Pilots in the World War II or 1940s. Yes, that same Tuskegee, the Institute of, I guess, Excellence. I went to Morehouse though, so excuse me. One of those students of Booker T. Washington, then, as you continue to build up this legacy, is George Washington Carver, who they always mention in Black History Month presentations. An agriculturalist scientist, inventor, and educator at Tuskegee University. So they can tell you about George Washington Carver and his inventions. They won't tell you about the Henry Blairs. They won't connect it to Booker T. Washington. They definitely won't link that to Frederick McKinley Jones, or how those contributions or that lineage, those patents, that brilliance, that Black male, his efforts, his Americanism, I guess, leads to $264 billion in total two-way U.S. trade for the agricultural goods that we still rely upon as one of our primary drivers of global trade. And so I know Tone Talks is always looking for folks who will call into the show and have a comment. Hopefully, if they do want to say, well, you took some snippets out of it, they do notify the guy. I know if they notify him, it's probably a quicker and more instant notification that somebody used some of his language or his voiceover in it. B1 Brother Moses just had to put that out there. How do I feel about the card itself? Man, the card is important. And legacy is important. I'm not somebody who's going to get that product, though. I know the difference between products. I agree that it is, and it's an essential step forward. But I also agree that they were looking at step 5 or step 6. I think when you look at this card, it is the as symbolism and the image that they put on there. And I don't know. But when you look at the card as symbolism, it is one that tells the United States and the world abroad that, yes, African-American banking system is a viable option. I think the symbolism in it is that there is a funding mechanism or a distribution of funds mechanism that is currently in place should reparations be afforded, or should that $200 billion be cut and distributed to the American descendants of slavery. So to have a black banker come out and say, yeah, I'll give you the sign off. Yeah, they tried to retract it a little bit later, but the media is out there. But to have a black banker take that step, put it on the card, it shows that we are not waiting for the JP Morgan Chases to do the same and those other major banks. And then it also is that sign that he still has his ear to the street, because I swear to God, I was just talking about putting the Harriet Tubman on that same bill. It may not be through me, just the energy in the air, but it's not a bill. It doesn't have to be a bill, but to create a currency. My idea would be on that, how it says Federal Treasury note. Mine's is the Freedman Bank note, but it's still an accepted currency. You can see black people on currency all over the world. I think that we have some great candidates to put on ours as we continue to have these conversations from that 50,000 foot view. Be one, Brother Moses, and that's all I got, and I'm out.